The sound cuts through the morning stillness like a blade. Ceramic against oak, sharp and sudden. The coffee mug landing harder than intended on the polished surface of his desk. I watched the dark liquid slosh dangerously close to the paper spread between us. My quarterly reports arranged with the precision of someone who has rehearsed this moment a dozen times in the mirror of the men's room. My body responds before my mind can catch up. A flinch. Small, involuntary. The kind of reaction that betrays everything I have been trying to hide for the past 6 months. Damien notices. Of course he notices. He notices everything about me. Every hesitation, every breath, every glance I steal when I think he is not looking. I had been ready. At least I thought I had been. The presentation slides were perfect, each graph color-coded and cross-referenced. Every projection backed by 3 separate data sources. I had practiced the opening line until it felt natural, until the tremor in my voice disappeared, until I could pretend that standing in front of him did not make my chest feel too small for my lungs. But now, under his gaze, the words have scattered like startled birds. The carefully constructed sentences I had memorized lie in ruins somewhere between my throat and the space that separates us. The presentation remote feels foreign in my palm, slick with the moisture I pretend is not there. Damien leans back in his chair, the leather sighing beneath his weight. His expression gives nothing away. It never does. That controlled neutrality is part of what makes him so unsettling, so impossible to read. His dark eyes move from the spilled coffee to my face, studying me with the same methodical attention he gives to budget forecasts and strategic planning documents. Then his lips curve. Not a smile, not exactly. Something more dangerous than that. Something that makes the air in the office feel thinner, harder to breathe. Stay after hours if you want my approval. The words hang in the space between us, settling over my shoulders like a coat that is both too heavy and not warm enough. I know I should take them at face value. Professional feedback delivered with characteristic bluntness. A demand for more effort, more polish, more proof that I deserve to be here in this glass tower, in this maze of cubicles and corner offices, in the orbit of a man who could destroy my career with a single phone call. But the way he says it, the way his voice drops just slightly on the word approval, the way his eyes do not leave my face, watching for my reaction with an intensity that makes my skin feel too tight. This is not just about work. We both know it, though neither of us will say it aloud. Not yet. The office around us has taken on that particular quality of afternoon light, golden and thick, bleeding through the blinds in parallel lines that cut across the carpet. Dust motes drift in the still air, suspended like tiny planets in their own slow orbit. The building hums with the quiet efficiency of climate control and fluorescent bulbs, but beneath it all is a silence that feels weighted, expectant. I am 24 years old enough to know better, young enough to pretend that what I feel when I look at him is anything other than want. Dangerous want. The kind that makes men like me disappear from companies like this, erased as thoroughly as a deleted email, as if we never existed at all. Damien is 8 years older, a lifetime in corporate terms. He has presence in a way that cannot be taught or faked. When he walks through the office, conversations pause. When he speaks in meetings, people lean forward. When he smiles, which is rare, it feels like being selected for something exclusive and perilous. I have been watching him for 6 months now, ever since I started this job fresh out of college, my business degree still warm from the printer. I have cataloged his habits, his preferences, the way he takes his coffee black and his meetings brief. I know which days he stays late, which projects make him frown, which of his rare compliments mean something, and which are just politeness wrapped in professional courtesy. What I have not been able to catalog is this. The way he looks at me sometimes when he thinks I am focused on my screen. The pause that stretches just a beat too long when I hand him a report. The careful distance he maintains in the elevator, standing just far enough away that our shoulders will not brush, as if he knows exactly how much space is safe and how much would be crossing a line. The coffee is growing cold in the mug, a ring of condensation forming on the oak surface. I should say something. Thank you for the feedback. I will revise the projections. I will stay as late as necessary to get this right. The appropriate responses queue up in my mind, professional and measured, the language of a young man who understands his place in the hierarchy. Instead, I stand there, holding the presentation remote like a talisman, my thumb resting on the advance button, though the slides have long since gone dark. My suit feels too formal suddenly, the tie around my neck too tight. I wonder if he can see the way my pulse jumps in my throat, if he knows that every word he speaks to me gets replayed in my mind long after the conversation ends. The afternoon light continues its slow progression across the office floor, and somewhere in the distance, I can hear the elevator chiming as people begin to trickle out for the day. 5:30 approaches like a tide, and with it, the decision I have been avoiding for months. Stay after hours. The invitation. The challenge. The line drawn in the sand between what we are and what we could become. I know I should leave. Pack up my laptop, straighten my tie, nod politely, and say something about first thing tomorrow morning. Walk out of this office and back to my small apartment, back to my carefully ordered life where wanting someone like Damian Reeves is nothing more than a dangerous fantasy, a story I tell myself in the dark hours before dawn. But I also know I will not. Cannot. The pull is too strong now, the current too swift to swim against. So I stand there in the dying light, presentation forgotten, coffee growing cold, and wait for him to tell me exactly what staying after hours will cost me. I am 24, though some days I feel both older and younger than that number suggests. Older when I sit in boardrooms listening to men discuss quarterly projections with the casual authority of those who have never doubted their right to speak. Younger when I catch my reflection in the elevator doors and see someone still pretending to belong in a world of press suits and leather portfolios. This job was supposed to be my beginning. Fresh out of college, business degree in hand, I had imagined myself climbing some invisible ladder toward a future that looked like success. What I had not anticipated was how small the corporate world would make me feel, how the endless cubicles and fluorescent lights would shrink my ambitions down to surviving each day without embarrassing myself. My desk sits in the middle of the third floor, part of a maze of identical workstations arranged with geometric precision. Gray fabric partitions divide us into neat squares, each one containing a life measured in spreadsheets and meeting schedules. I spend my days buried in data analysis, tracking market trends and consumer patterns, translating numbers into presentations that somehow never feel adequate. But none of that matters when Damian appears. He is 32, though his presence suggests someone who has been commanding rooms for decades. There is something about the way he moves through the office that makes conversations pause mid-sentence, makes people straighten their spines and check their phones as if suddenly remembering urgent tasks. His suits are cut precisely, never a wrinkle or thread out of place. And his dark hair is styled with the kind of effortless perfection that probably requires more effort than I spend on my entire morning routine. When Damian speaks, his voice carries the weight of absolute certainty. He never hedges, never softens his words with maybe or perhaps. When he gives direction, people listen not just because he signs their paychecks, but because something in his manner suggests that disagreement would be both futile and foolish. I have watched him dismantle poorly prepared presentations with surgical precision, his questions cutting straight to the weaknesses others try to hide. I have seen him praise work that deserved recognition, his rare approvals delivered with the same measured control as his criticisms. People fear him, respect him, sometimes resent him, but they always pay attention when he enters a room. What disturbs me is how much I crave that attention for myself. Our interactions began as they should have. Professional, distant. He was the senior director. I was the new analyst assigned to his team. He reviewed my work, offered corrections, provided guidance on company protocols. Standard supervisory relationship, the kind played out in offices across the city every day. But somewhere between my third week and my third month, something shifted. It started with glances that lingered a fraction too long. When he handed me revised reports, his fingers would brush mine, the contact so brief I could convince myself I had imagined it. During team meetings, I would catch him watching me when I spoke, his expression unreadable but his attention absolute in a way that made my throat feel tight. The changes were subtle at first. He began stopping by my desk more frequently, ostensibly to check on project progress, but often staying longer than necessary. He would lean against the partition, close enough that I could smell his cologne, expensive and understated, and ask questions that seemed designed more to keep me talking than to gather information. There were moments when the professional mask would slip just slightly, a smile that felt different from his standard courteous expression, a comment about working late that carried undertones I was not brave enough to examine too closely. Questions about my background, my plans, my thoughts on matters that had nothing to do with quarterly reports or market analysis. I told myself I was reading too much into these interactions. Men like Damien did not notice men like me, not in the way I wanted to be noticed. The corporate world had rules, hierarchies, boundaries that existed for good reasons. I was young, inexperienced, grateful just to have survived my probationary period. The last thing I should do was mistake professional mentorship for something more dangerous. But late at night, alone in my apartment, I would replay our conversations with forensic attention to detail. The way he said my name, the pause before he handed me assignments, the expression that crossed his face when I stayed past 5:30, working on revisions he could have easily assigned to someone with more seniority. My apartment is a studio on the west side, small enough that I can see every corner from my bed. The walls are still mostly bare, decorated only with my diploma and a few framed photographs from college. I keep telling myself I will make it feel more like home once I figure out who I am in this new life, but months have passed, and it still feels temporary, like a waiting room for a future I cannot quite picture. Most evenings, I sit at my small kitchen table with my laptop open, working on projects that could wait until tomorrow, but somehow feel urgent when Damien has touched them. I revise reports until the words blur together, polish presentations until every slide gleams with professional perfection, all while pretending I am not doing it for the moment when he will look at my work and nod with something approaching approval. The dangerous truth is that my days have begun to revolve around him. Not just the work, but the anticipation of seeing him. The careful timing of my arrivals and departures to maximize the chances of crossing paths. The attention I pay to which coffee shop he prefers, which elevator bank he uses, which meetings make him smile, and which leave him looking irritated. I have become a student of Damian Reeves, and the education is destroying my ability to concentrate on anything else. Now, standing in his office with the weight of his invitation settling over me like morning fog, I realize that all those months of careful observation have led to this moment. Stay after hours if you want my approval. The words that will either destroy the careful balance I have maintained or finally tip it towards something I'm not sure I am ready to name. The rest of the day passes in a haze of pretended normalcy. I return to my desk, arrange my papers with mechanical precision, open spreadsheets that might as well be written in a foreign language for all the sense they make to me now. The numbers blur together on my screen, while Damien's words echo in my mind with the persistence of a song I cannot stop humming. Stay after hours if you want my approval. I type responses to emails without reading them properly, attend a conference call where I contribute nothing more than occasional agreements, review budget projections while seeing only the curve of his smile, the deliberate weight behind his words. My colleagues move through their afternoon routines around me, but I feel separated from them by glass, watching their productivity from a distance I cannot bridge. Sarah from accounting stops by my desk to discuss discrepancies in the quarterly expenses. She speaks for several minutes before I realize she is waiting for a response, her eyebrows raised in polite expectation. I apologize, ask her to repeat the question, try to focus on the number she shows me, but my attention keeps drifting to the corner office where Damien's silhouette moves behind frosted glass. Was it just about work? The question circles through my thoughts like water down a drain, impossible to stop or ignore. I replay the moment obsessively, analyzing every word, every pause, every micro-expression I might have missed. Professional feedback delivered with characteristic directness. That is the rational explanation, the safe interpretation that lets me sleep at night and show up tomorrow morning without feeling like I am walking into a trap of my own making. But the way he looked at me, the way his voice dropped on the word approval, as if it meant something more than professional satisfaction. The way he did not look away when our eyes met, holding my gaze just long enough to make the silence feel intentional, loaded with possibility and threat in equal measure. I have become an expert at reading the subtle languages of corporate hierarchy, the careful dance of power and deference that keeps organizations functioning. I know the difference between constructive criticism and personal attack, between professional interest and simple courtesy. What I felt in that office transcended all of those familiar categories, entering territory I have no map for navigating. The afternoon stretches toward evening with agonizing slowness. I watch the digital clock in the corner of my screen advance minute by minute, each passing hour bringing me closer to a decision I am not ready to make. 5 o'clock comes and goes. Then 5:15, 5:30. Around me, the office begins its daily exodus. Conversations fade as people gather their belongings, check their phones, make plans for dinner or drinks, or whatever normal people do with their evenings. The elevator chimes repeatedly as the building slowly empties, leaving behind only the dedicated few who stay late by choice or necessity. I sit at my desk with my laptop bag beside my chair, one hand resting on the zipper. Leave now, and nothing changes. Pack up, walk to the elevator, press the button for the parking garage, drive home to my small apartment where I can pretend this afternoon never happened. Return tomorrow morning with professional distance restored. Treat his words as nothing more than a supervisor's challenge to improve my performance. The sensible choice. The safe choice. The choice that preserves the careful balance I have maintained for 6 months, keeping my dangerous fascination with Damian Reeves contained within the boundaries of acceptable workplace admiration. But I do not leave. Instead, I watch the office empty around me, feeling like the last person in a theater after the play has ended. The cleaning crew will arrive soon, but for now, the silence feels absolute, broken only by the hum of computers left running and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. At 6:15, I see movement in Damian's office. His silhouette appears at the frosted glass, then disappears. A few minutes later, he emerges, jacket draped over one arm, briefcase in hand. He moves through the darkened office with the same controlled precision he brings to everything, his footsteps muffled by the carpet, but somehow still audible in the quiet. He stops when he sees me still at my desk, his expression shifting from mild surprise to something more complex. Not quite a smile, but close. A recognition of something passing between us that neither of us has named aloud. You state, not a question, an acknowledgement. The simple statement carries more weight than it should, confirming what we both suspected. This is not about overtime or dedication or proving my commitment to the company. This is about something else entirely, something that makes the air between us feel charged with electricity. I nod, not trusting my voice to remain steady. My laptop bag sits beside my chair like evidence of a choice I almost made, a different path I considered, but ultimately could not take. The office around us feels transformed in the after-hours quiet, familiar furniture and equipment taking on new significance in the dim light filtering through the blinds. Damian sets his briefcase down, a deliberate gesture that suggests he is not planning to leave immediately. His jacket remains draped over his arm, but he makes no move toward the elevator. Instead, he studies me with that same methodical attention he brings to quarterly reports and strategic planning, as if I am a problem he is trying to solve. The silence stretches between us, not uncomfortable, but weighted with possibility. Outside, the city continues its evening rhythm, traffic flowing through streets below, lights beginning to flicker on in windows across the downtown corridor. But here, in this suspended moment, it feels as if the world has narrowed down to just the two of us and the choice that hangs in the air like morning fog, impossible to ignore and equally impossible to see through clearly. I realize that by staying, I have already answered a challenge. Now I wait to discover what my answer will cost me. After that night, the ground beneath my feet shifts in ways I cannot articulate but feel in every interaction. Nothing has changed, yet everything is different. The office looks the same, sounds the same, functions with the same corporate efficiency it always has, but I move through it now like a man learning to walk on a ship, constantly adjusting to a new kind of gravity. Damien and I spoke for 23 minutes in the empty office that evening. I know, because I checked my phone afterward, needing some concrete measure of time to prove the conversation actually happened. 23 minutes of careful words and loaded silences, of professional topics that felt anything but professional, of boundaries acknowledged without being named. He asked about my project timeline. I explained my approach to the quarterly analysis. He offered suggestions for improving my presentation style. I listened with the kind of attention usually reserved for life or death instructions. Standard supervisory discussion, the kind that happens in offices everywhere, except for the way his eyes never left my face and the way I felt like every word carried weight beyond its literal meaning. When I finally left that night, walking through the empty parking garage to my car, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, exactly, but from something closer to recognition. The understanding that a line had been crossed, even if neither of us had acknowledged it openly. Now, 3 days later, I find myself cataloging changes with the obsessive attention of a scientist studying a new species. The way Damien pauses outside my cubicle, ostensibly reviewing something on his phone, but somehow always available when I look up from my screen. The assignments that seem designed to keep me in the office past normal hours, complex enough to justify the extra time, but never quite urgent enough to require it. Yesterday, he asked me to revise a market analysis report that was already perfectly acceptable. The corrections he suggested were minor, cosmetic rather than substantive, but they required me to stay until nearly 7 o'clock to implement. I worked alone on the 3rd floor, the building growing quiet around me, until he appeared at my desk with coffee and questions about my progress. The coffee was exactly how I like it, though I had never told him my preferences. 2 sugars, splash of cream, the expensive blend from the cafe across the street, rather than the bitter brew from the office kitchen. He set the cup beside my keyboard without comment, as if bringing coffee to subordinates was something he did regularly, though I had never seen him do it for anyone else. We discussed the revisions for 15 minutes, standing closer together than the conversation required. When he leaned over to point out a section that needed adjustment, I could smell his cologne and feel the warmth radiating from his body. My concentration scattered like leaves in wind, making simple tasks feel impossibly complex. The pattern repeats with subtle variations. A document that needs urgent review, delivered to my desk at 4:30 with the request that I prioritize it above everything else. A client presentation that requires last-minute changes, modifications that somehow take hours to complete properly. A spreadsheet with formulas that need verification, numbers that must be checked and double-checked until perfection becomes an impossibly moving target. Each assignment comes with the same underlying message. Stay late. Work when the office is empty. Be here when he is here alone. I find myself anticipating these requests with a hunger that frightens me. The normal rhythm of 9 to 5 feels insufficient now, truncated, like a song cut off before the chorus. I arrive earlier each morning and leave later each evening. Not because the work demands it, but because I've become addicted to the possibility of those charged moments when the professional mask slips just slightly. My productivity during normal hours suffers accordingly. I sit through morning meetings thinking about the previous evening's conversation. I review spreadsheets while replaying the way he said my name when asking for the quarterly projections. I attend conference calls where I contribute nothing meaningful because my attention is focused on whether he will find a reason to stop by my desk before 5 o'clock. Sarah from accounting mentions that I seem distracted lately. She asks if everything is okay, if the workload is becoming too much to handle. I assure her that I am fine, just focused on some challenging projects, but her concern makes me realize how visible my transformation has become. I wonder what she sees when she looks at me now. What changes are apparent to someone who knew me before Damien's gravity began pulling me into a different orbit? The most dangerous part is how natural it feels. How easily I have adapted to this new rhythm of anticipation and fulfillment, this cycle of waiting for his attention and receiving it in carefully measured doses. When he nods approvingly at a completed report, the satisfaction feels disproportionate to the accomplishment. When he suggests improvements, I implement them with the dedication of someone trying to decode a foreign language. I know I should be more careful. Corporate hierarchies exist for good reasons, and whatever is happening between us exists in violation of multiple policies I signed when I accepted this position. But knowledge and action are different things entirely, and I find myself powerless to step back from the edge I am approaching. Each evening, when I finally leave the office, I tell myself tomorrow will be different. I will maintain professional distance, focus on my actual responsibilities, stop reading meaning into every glance and gesture. But then morning comes, and I find myself checking my reflection in the elevator mirrors, straightening my tie, preparing for another day in Damien's orbit. The transformation is subtle but undeniable. I am becoming someone I do not entirely recognize, someone whose days revolve around the approval of a man who holds my career in his hands and who seems to understand exactly how much power that gives him. The revelation comes on a Thursday evening when autumn rain streaks the office windows and the city below blurs into impressionist smears of light and shadow. I am alone on the third floor, or so I think, working on a competitive analysis that Damien requested with his usual air of casual authority. The document is nearly complete, every chart perfectly formatted, every conclusion supported by meticulous research, but I find myself polishing details that do not need polishing, extending the work to fill the time I hope he will appear. The building feels different after hours, quieter, more intimate, as if the corporate machinery that defines our daylight interactions has powered down to reveal something more human underneath. I have grown comfortable in this after-hours version of our workplace, this shadow office where normal rules seem suspended and anything feels possible. When I hear footsteps approaching across the carpet, my pulse quickens with the familiar anticipation that has become as regular as breathing. I do not look up immediately, pretending to be absorbed in my screen while tracking his movement through my peripheral vision. He stops beside my desk, close enough that I can see his reflection in my monitor, his presence shifting the air around me in ways I have learned to recognize. The competitive analysis is spread across my desk in printed form, pages marked with careful annotations in my handwriting. I have been preparing to present my findings, rehearsing key points the way I always do before delivering work to him. But when I look up, his expression stops the prepared words in my throat. He is not looking at the report. He is looking at me, studying my face with an intensity that makes me feel transparent, as if he can see through every professional pretense I have constructed over the past months. The silence stretches between us, weighted with something I cannot name, but recognize in the way my heart hammers against my ribs. You push yourself harder than anyone I have seen. His voice is quieter than usual, stripped of the corporate authority that usually defines his tone. The words settle over me like a diagnosis, accurate and somehow devastating in their simplicity. He steps closer, the space between us shrinking to nothing, and I realize we have moved beyond the careful choreography of supervisor and employee that has governed our interactions. You think I do not notice? The question hangs in the air like smoke. I want to respond, to offer some explanation that will restore the professional distance between us, but my throat feels tight and my thoughts scatter like startled birds. Of course he has noticed. How could he not? The long hours, the desperate attention to detail, the way I hang on his every word, as if my life depends on parsing his approval correctly. The rain continues its quiet percussion against the windows, and somewhere in the distance, the elevator chimes as the last few stragglers leave for the evening. We are alone now in a way that feels both dangerous and inevitable, as if all our careful conversations and loaded glances have been leading to this moment of recognition. He moves closer still, close enough that I can see the fine lines around his eyes, the way his perfectly styled hair has loosened slightly after a long day. Close enough that I can smell his cologne and feel the warmth radiating from his body. close enough that when he speaks again, his voice carries the intimacy of a secret shared in darkness. You are not here because you need the work. You are here because you need me to see you. The truth lands like a physical blow, stealing my breath and leaving me dizzy with the sudden exposure. Every late evening, every revised report, every carefully crafted excuse to remain in the office past normal hours suddenly arranges itself into a pattern so obvious I cannot believe I thought it was hidden. He has known all along, not just suspected or wondered, but known with the certainty of someone who has been watching me as carefully as I've been watching him. The nervous glances I thought were subtle. The eagerness I tried to disguise as professional dedication. The silent devotion I imagined was invisible. All of it seen, cataloged, understood by a man who has been reading me like an open book while I convinced myself I was maintaining some semblance of professional distance. I feel exposed in a way that goes beyond embarrassment, stripped down to something raw and vulnerable that I never intended to reveal. My carefully constructed identity as a competent young professional dissolves, leaving behind only the truth he has named. I am here because I need him to see me. Not my work, not my potential, not my dedication to the company, but me, the man behind the reports and presentations, the one who has been circling his orbit for months like a planet desperate for the sun's attention. The admission should feel like failure, like a humiliating exposure of weakness. Instead, it feels like relief. The exhausting pretense of professional objectivity falls away, leaving behind something simpler and more dangerous. Want, pure and undisguised, the kind that makes men like me disappear from companies like this, but also the kind that makes everything else feel secondary and unimportant. He does not move away when the silence stretches, does not offer reassurances or attempt to restore the professional boundaries we have just shattered. Instead, he waits, watching my face as the implications of his words settle over me like morning fog. The power dynamic between us has always been unequal, but now it feels absolute. He holds not just my career in his hands, but my secret, the dangerous truth I never meant to reveal. Outside, the city continues its evening rhythm, but here in this suspended moment, nothing exists except the space between us and the recognition that has finally been named aloud. I am no longer pretending to be anything other than what I am. Someone who needs to be seen by him, whose days have been reorganized around the possibility of his attention, whose professional life has become secondary to this more fundamental hunger. The question now is what he intends to do with that knowledge. The days that follow our moment of recognition blur together in a haze of careful avoidance and heightened awareness. We do not speak of what was said in the empty office, but the words hang between us like a bridge neither of us is ready to cross. Damien returns to his professional demeanor during daylight hours, offering crisp feedback on my reports and maintaining the appropriate distance during team meetings. But underneath the corporate civility, something has shifted irreversibly. I find myself studying his face during presentations, searching for signs of the man who looked at me with such unsettling clarity that Thursday evening. The knowledge that he sees me, truly sees me, makes every interaction feel charged with electricity. When he asks me to revise a client proposal, I hear the subtext. When he nods approval at my quarterly projections, I feel the weight of his attention like sunlight through a magnifying glass. The pattern of late assignments continues, but now with an edge of inevitability that makes my pulse quicken each time he approaches my desk after 5 o'clock. A budget analysis that requires urgent attention. A market research report that needs comprehensive revision. A presentation for senior leadership that must be perfect, which means staying until the work meets standards that seem to shift with each iteration. I know what these assignments really are. Invitations wrapped in professional necessity. Opportunities for us to exist alone in the after-hours office where normal rules feel suspended and anything might happen. But knowing this does not make me refuse them. If anything, it makes me anticipate them with a hunger that frightens me. 3 weeks after our moment of truth, he gives me another late assignment. A comprehensive analysis of emerging market trends, complex enough to justify several hours of overtime, important enough that declining would seem unprofessional. The familiar dance, but this time something in his expression suggests the performance is coming to an end. I work alone as the office empties around me. The familiar sounds of departure marking time until we will be the only two people left on the third floor. My concentration wavers as 6 o'clock approaches, then 7, each passing minute building tension like a storm gathering on the horizon. The market analysis sits before me, half completed, but my attention keeps drifting to the corner office where light still glows behind frosted glass. At 7:30, he appears at my desk with the same quiet authority he brings to everything. But tonight there is something different in his manner. Less patience, perhaps. Less willingness to maintain the elaborate fiction we have constructed around these evening encounters. He reviews my progress with perfunctory attention, his comments brief and distracted, as if the work itself has become secondary to some larger purpose. When he finishes his review, he does not immediately retreat to his office, as he usually does. Instead, he remains beside my desk, close enough that I can feel the heat radiating from his body, and the silence between us takes on a weight that makes breathing difficult. The building around us is completely quiet now. No sounds of cleaning crews or security guards, just the two of us suspended in this bubble of fluorescent light and corporate furniture. Then he gives me another directive, a task that could easily wait until morning, a revision to the presentation format that requires nothing more than moving slides around and adjusting font sizes. Work that any competent assistant could complete in 20 minutes, but which he presents as if it demands my immediate attention. The absurdity of it breaks something loose inside me. All these months of pretending, of accepting assignments that barely qualify as necessary, of staying late to complete work that could wait, of participating in this elaborate choreography without ever acknowledging what we are really doing. The careful professional language that has disguised our real intentions suddenly feels inadequate. Is this about the work? I ask, my voice steadier than I expected, or about me? The question hangs in the air between us like a challenge thrown down. 3 months ago, I never would have dared to speak so directly, to strip away the corporate politeness that governs our interactions. But the revelation of his knowledge has changed something fundamental in our dynamic. If he already sees through my professional facade, there seems little point in maintaining it. The silence that follows feels endless, stretching across seconds that feel like hours. He does not answer immediately, does not offer the reassuring deflection that would allow us to retreat back into safe territory. Instead, he studies my face with the same methodical attention he brings to quarterly reports, as if calculating something complex and dangerous. When he finally moves, it is not away from me, but closer, closing the distance between us until I can see the fine details of his expression, the way his dark eyes seem to take in everything about me in a single glance. He is close enough now that I can feel his breath when he speaks, close enough that the space between us feels charged with possibility and threat in equal measure. The unspoken truth crystallizes in that moment, sharp and undeniable. This has never been about work. The late assignments, the careful attention to my progress, the way he watches me during meetings, the coffee delivered at exactly the right temperature, the revisions that require hours to complete properly. All of it has been an elaborate seduction disguised as professional development. But knowing this brings no relief, only a more acute awareness of the choice that lies before me. I can walk away now, pack up my laptop, and retreat to the safety of my small apartment, where wanting someone like Damian Reeves remains nothing more than a dangerous fantasy. I can show up tomorrow morning with professional distance restored, treat tonight as an aberration that will not be repeated. Or I can step forward into the dangerous intimacy he is offering, knowing that crossing this line will change everything about who I am and what I become in this corporate world that has its own rules about men like us. The office is dark beyond our small circle of light, the city glittering through rain-streaked windows, and in this suspended moment, I realize that the choice has already been made, has been made for months, In every late evening I have chosen to stay, every assignment I have accepted, every moment I have allowed myself to be drawn deeper into his orbit. Now, I simply have to acknowledge what I have already chosen. The office is dark now, the city lights burning through the glass like distant stars. I sit at Damien's desk. Though I cannot remember exactly how I came to be here, the transition from my cubicle to his corner office lost somewhere in the blur of what has just passed between us. The leather chair still holds the warmth of his presence, expensive and unfamiliar beneath me, a reminder that I am occupying space that was never meant for someone like me. The coffee mug from this morning still sits on the corner of his desk, cold and forgotten, a relic from when our relationship still pretended to be about quarterly reports and professional development. It feels like a lifetime ago, though the digital clock on his computer screen tells me only 3 hours have passed since he asked me that final question about whether this was about work or about me. My tie hangs loose around my neck, the knot undone sometime during our conversation, though I cannot recall when I stopped caring about maintaining the professional appearance that once seemed so important. My shirt sleeves are rolled up, my jacket draped over the back of the chair, as if my body has instinctively prepared for a different kind of work than what brought me here originally. The memory of his closeness lingers on my skin like cologne, though he left 20 minutes ago with the same controlled composure he brings to everything else. No dramatic exits or passionate declarations, just a quiet acknowledgement of what had shifted between us and a careful retreat that left me alone with the consequences of choices neither of us had spoken aloud, but both of us had made. We did not cross the final line, not in the way that would make tomorrow impossible, not in the way that would require resignations or transfers or awkward conversations with human resources. But we came close enough to see it clearly, close enough to understand exactly what we were choosing not to do and why. The restraint somehow made it more intense, not less, as if the boundaries we maintained made every touch, every shared breath, every moment of proximity feel charged with meaning. When he finally stepped back, when the professional distance reasserted itself like gravity returning after weightlessness, neither of us pretended that nothing had changed. The careful choreography we had maintained for months had reached its natural conclusion, revealing what we both suspected but never dared to name. We want each other in ways that make our professional relationship impossible to sustain, but we also understand the cost of pursuing that want beyond the safe confines of empty offices and after-hours conversations. Now I sit in his chair, surrounded by the artifacts of his corporate success, and try to process what has just happened to my carefully ordered life. The quarterly reports stacked neatly on his desk, the awards mounted on his wall, the family photograph turned face down that I try not to think about too carefully. All the trappings of a life I thought I wanted, viewed now from the inside of a moment that has changed everything about what I think I deserve. On the desk before me, partially hidden beneath a stack of budget projections, I notice a note in Damien's precise handwriting. A single word written on company letterhead. The paper expensive and official-looking despite the brevity of its message. Approved. I lift the paper carefully, as if it might disintegrate under too much attention. The word is written in his characteristic style, letters formed with the same meticulous control he brings to everything else. It could be feedback on any of the dozens of reports I have submitted over the past months, a simple acknowledgement that my work meets his standards. But I know it is more than that. Much more. The note is an acknowledgement of what passed between us this evening. A recognition that the months of careful approach and professional pretense have led to something that transcends the normal boundaries of supervisor and employee. It is approval not just of my work, but of me, of the man who stays late not because he needs the overtime, but because he needs to be seen, of the dangerous want we have both acknowledged without acting upon, of the choice to remain in this suspended space between professional propriety and personal desire. I fold the note carefully, the paper crisp between my fingers, and slip it into my shirt pocket where it rests against my chest like a secret. The weight of it is negligible, but its presence feels significant, a tangible reminder of this evening when everything changed and nothing changed simultaneously. The city continues its rhythm beyond the windows. Traffic flowing through streets below, lights flickering on in apartments where people are settling into their normal evening routines. Somewhere out there, Damien is driving home to whatever life awaits him outside this building, carrying his own version of tonight's events, his own understanding of what we have begun. I should leave, pack up the market analysis that provided our excuse for staying late, straighten my tie, restore my professional appearance, and retreat to my small apartment where I can pretend to process what has happened. Return tomorrow morning with appropriate distance restored. Treat tonight as a singular moment that will not be repeated. But I know that tomorrow will be different now. Not because anything explicit was said or done, but because the careful fiction we maintained has been exposed as fiction. We can continue to work together, continue to maintain professional boundaries, continue to pretend that our relationship exists only within the acceptable parameters of corporate hierarchy. But we will do so now with full knowledge of what lies beneath that pretense. The note in my pocket feels warm against my chest, a reminder that some forms of approval carry dangers that are impossible to quantify or control. As I finally stand to leave, straightening my tie and gathering my things, I realize that I am no longer the same person who walked into this building this morning. The transformation that began months ago, with a coffee mug striking an oak desk, has reached its quiet completion. I am approved. The question now is what I will do with that approval, and whether the man who gave it to me understands the power he has placed in my hands.